English by the Nature Method by Arthur M. Jensen. Brought to you by Ayan Academy.
Chapter 50. Dirty Business. "What have you got there?" Marshall asked, noticing something that Storm was taking out of his pocket as they sat down to their lunch. "Stamps," came the reply. "Let's have a look at them," Marshall said, with the ready interest of a fellow collector. Storm placed the stamps on the table, and Marshall began to look through them. He took up one at a time, held it up to the light, and regarded it carefully from all sides. At last he picked out 3 among them and asked, "Who sold them to you?" "Why?" Storm wanted to know. "Is there anything wrong with them?" "I should say there is," Marshall replied. "As far as I'm able to judge, there are at least 3 false stamps among them." Storm regarded Marshall with surprise in his eyes. "But the owner of the stamp shop told me on his word of honor that they were real and worth the money. I must say that I don't know very much about stamps from that country, so I wasn't able to judge for myself. But the owner was such a nice old man, and I really felt that he was telling me the truth about those stamps. It was that little shop with stamps and coins a few houses from the office, you know." "I thought so," said Marshall. "Word of honor? That man doesn't know what the word honor means. He won't tell the truth about anything if he thinks he can make money by lying about it. It was the same with the former owner of the shop. He was just as bad as this one. You can't trust those 2 men. You should never believe anything that either of them says. I went there once to buy some Roman coins in order to start a collection. I didn't know much about coins at the time and was not able to judge the quality of 2 silver pieces the man showed me, so I had to trust his word that the coins were real old Roman pieces. Some months later, I was showing my new little collection to a friend, an expert in the matter of coins, and do you know what? He was able to pick out 2 false pieces among the coins, and they were the ones which that lying old man, the former owner of the shop, had sold me. No, you can't trust either of those men. Now, of course, I've learned some of the ways to judge the quality of a coin. When you drop it, for instance, you can often hear if it's false or not. But I don't understand their motives for doing things like that," Storm said. "Even if they do earn a few shillings more one day by saying something which isn't correct, they're sure to make their customers angry, so that they never return. Such business methods can't be very good." "No, of course not," Marshall replied. "I say, let's go and have some fun with him. He doesn't know me. I might go in and try to make him buy back those stamps. Shall we?" "There's no keeping you down," Storm answered with a laugh. "But how will you do it?" "I don't quite know yet. Persons like our kind friend with the false stamps usually have great respect for people with money. So perhaps I might tell him a story about being a young man of property who has become interested in stamps and wants to buy a whole collection at once." "What do you think of that?" Marshall asked. "The plan seems perfect to me," Storm answered. "I can find nothing wrong with it, if you think you can perform your part of the fun. I must say that I admire your courage. I'm sure I couldn't go through with it without showing by some word or act that I was making fun of him." "Well, to tell you the truth," Marshall replied, "I'm a little afraid, myself. And I have to support my self-respect by telling myself that our motives in this foolish affair are perfectly pure. Well, here we are at the shop. You wait outside for me." A quarter of an hour later, Marshall again appeared at the door of the shop. He was smiling all over his face, so Storm could understand that everything had gone well. As soon as they had turned round the corner, Marshall had to stop and have a good laugh before he was able to tell Storm what had taken place in the shop. "First," Marshall said, "I told him my name was Reginald Willoughby, just returned from India, where I had been hunting lions, or whatever it is one hunts in India. There are lions in India, aren't there?" This seemed to make a deep impression upon him. especially when I began speaking about the stamp collection that I was planning to start. His behavior at once showed great respect, and he gave me to understand that he would think it a privilege to be allowed to help me to find the very best stamps for my collection. I told him all about my life in India, that I had visited the court of a famous prince in India and had been invited to stay at his palace, where I lived like a prince among the real princes. He had 7 sons and 4 brothers. It was perfectly clear from my words and behavior that I wasn't very clever and knew nothing at all about stamps. He brought out all kinds of stamps, and when he saw that I showed an interest in those from India, he gave me a lot of information about them, only half of which was correct. The rest had very little to do with the truth. I believed every word, of course, and I could see from the look in his eyes that he thought he was going to get a nice bit of good English money out of me. The more foolish my words were, and the more foolish things I did, the more he seemed to admire and respect me. I tell you, I had such trouble trying not to laugh, and I was quite weak. At last I thought the right time had come to take out your false stamps. "Look here," I said. "I've just bought some very fine stamps from a friend, but as you have made me much more interested in Indian stamps now, perhaps you would like to buy these." He grew a bit cold at that, so I started for the door, as if I wanted to drop the whole matter. At once, his humor changed, and he was all smiles again and doing his best to keep an important customer. How much have you paid for them?" he asked, opening the drawer where he kept his money, as if he was going to pay for them at once. £1, I replied, thinking it was better to add something to the amount. "Well, I can't give you as much as that, of course," he answered. "I have to sell them again, you know." "Oh, quite," I said. "I understand that perfectly. Shall we say 15 shillings? That will satisfy us both." He had a hard time pulling himself together, poor fellow. Just think of it, to have to take back the false stamps he himself had sold. And he couldn't very well say anything because I might find out that it was he who had sold them. I was having the time of my life, I tell you. Well, he tried to get out of paying any money to me, of course, by suggesting that when I had decided what stamps I wanted, I could pay that amount less. "Yes, just as you wish," I said. "That's perfectly all right. I can pay for everything when I come for the stamps then. You see, I should like you to put them in the right order for me. Put them in a book, you know, and all that. You do that too, don't you?" "Yes, it will cost a bit extra, of course," he answered. "Of course," I replied. We looked at the stamps again, and I told him some more facts about myself. I had returned to look after some property in Scotland that had become mine after an uncle. To be sure, it was very strange for me to be back in England after having lived for more than a year at the court of an Indian prince. Out there had been 5 men just to look after the rooms and the clothes of each guest at the palace, and to see that their masters had everything they wanted. But here I felt I was hardly master of my own house. The housemaids did as they wanted to, etc. You should have heard me storm. One would think that anyone with just the usual amount of common sense would be able to see through my foolish behavior and my stories. But not he. He drank it all up. When I had chosen a lot of expensive stamps and was going to leave, I had discovered that I had very little money in my pocket and said that as this was the case, perhaps it was just as well if he paid the 15 shillings now. He had to do it, of course, and here's the money. "Nice work, Marshall, although a bit thick," Storm was able to say at last when he had stopped laughing. "I shouldn't have been able to perform an act like that. I'm sorry I couldn't be there myself. He must have had very little common sense to believe a story like that. But no doubt he will be brought to his senses again in a few days, when no Reginald Willoughby appears to buy his Indian stamps, and then he will begin to put 2 and 2 together. Perhaps that will teach him not to sell false stamps in the future." They decided to go home by train, but at the station a railway man told them that there would be no trains for the next 2 hours, as a train had run into an empty carriage at the station and almost smashed it up. It had to be taken away piece by piece, which a lot of workers were now doing. The information that the railway man gave them made them change their plans. But they were not sorry, as it was Saturday afternoon and they were just in the humor for doing something else and not for going home. I know the best way of spending the next 2 hours, Storm said. If it isn't too much trouble, I should like you to go with me to a good tailor's in the suburbs to order a new suit. It seems to me that I must have grown bigger since I came to England. My clothes don't fit me any longer. Another reason is that the manager has invited me to dinner at his home in a month's time, and I should like to look my best that evening in a really well-fitted suit. Oh, I see, replied Marshall. You want to shine before the weaker sex in the person of Marin. The old story of the stronger sex trying to make an impression on the weaker sex. But I thought the dinner was going to be a big affair with all the guests in dinner jackets. No, it's only a small dinner party with only the family and 2 or 3 guests, so no stand-up collar will be necessary. I don't like stiff collars. Not only are they so stiff that I can hardly turn my head, but I feel that my whole body gets stiff when I wear one, and I move about like a schoolboy at his first party. Yes, I feel like that too. So you're going to a family dinner at the manager's. I wonder who put that idea in his head to ask you to dinner. You're all wrong there. It's a privilege I've earned for myself by the clever work I've performed and by my bright conversations. Oh, stop a second, my poor friend, Marshall said. Rule number 1 for the perfect gentleman: never speak well of yourself, but leave that to others. Exercise C. Grammar. The words who, whom, whose, which, what are used to ask questions. When used in this way, they are called interrogative pronouns. Here are some examples. Who is this man? Whom did you visit? Whose book is this? Which of the children is the youngest? What are you looking for? Who, whom, whose are only used about persons, as may be seen from the examples given. What before a noun is used about both things and persons. Examples. What meat is this? What man would do that? Without a noun following, what is used about things only? What do you want? Which is used about both persons and things when it is followed by of and a noun. Examples. Which of the days of the week is the first? Which of the girls has told you the story? Even if you leave out of and the noun, you must use which if you ask about one or more out of a limited number of persons or things. If, for instance, you speak to a person about some books that you have both read, you may ask, which do you like best? You need not say, which of these books do you like the best? Because the person whom you are asking knows what books you are speaking of. Here are some more examples where you may use which without of and a noun. Instead of saying, which of the chairs do you prefer to sit in? You may say, which chair do you prefer to sit in? Instead of, which of the boys did you give the money? You may ask, which boy did you give the money?